Okay, immediately I have a question. When does this game take place? Because in the very first cutscene of the game, we have Sonic and Tails riding in the Tornado 1, which got destroyed during Sonic Adventure. Although the really weird part about it is that it's kind of implied that it gets destroyed here in this cutscene as well, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. Either this takes place before Sonic Adventure 1 and it didn't get destroyed, which would be incredibly weird because Sonic Advance 3 would have to take place after Adventure 1. So that would mean that the Rush games take place after Advance 2 but before Advance 3, which seems very unlikely considering it was the same team making all these games. Assumedly, they probably go in chronological order of release, right? The second option, I guess, is simply that Tails at some point rebuilt the Tornado 1. That's pretty sensible, but there's nothing in any game that hints toward that being the case. It's just here with no explanation. And then the third possibility is that they just didn't think about it. They just put the tornado in the game because whatever, who cares? Because they don't give a shit about continuity in Sonic. Which one is correct here? Well, that's for you to decide. But the answer is the third one. Anyway, now properly getting into the story of Sonic Rush Adventure. As we just saw, our story begins with Sonic and Tails heading to check out some sort of energy reading they find, and they get caught up in a big old tornado. And then they eventually end up washing up on a beach on an unfamiliar island where they get found by someone. And that someone introduces herself as Marine the Raccoon. And Marine is a very rambunctious and energetic kind of child character. And as you'll notice reading the subtitles, she has an Australian accent, as I'm using the official English translation of the game, as I don't really know of any more accurate to the Japanese translations out there, so I just gotta use this. But I do know that in Japanese, Marine has a Kansai accent, which is certain Japanese accents that you find in certain areas of Japan, primarily Osaka, to my understanding. And I'm not big enough of a weeb to exactly know what the implications about her character are supposed to be by giving her that accent. If I was to make a guess, then I would say it's probably to show that Sonic and Tails are very far away from, where they usually hang out, and maybe it's also supposed to imply a bit that we're kind of a little out in the boonies with this game. Again, that's just my guess of what the Kansai dialect is supposed to imply about a character. If anyone in the comments knows, please feel free to let me know. Anyway, Sonic, Tails, and Marine all do their introductions, and Marine explains that she found Sonic and Tails washed up on the shore of Southern Island. Not South Island, Southern Island. Very, very different. Kinda weird that they would have two islands with such insanely similar names in Sonic, but as we'll find later in the story, perhaps there's a reason for that. Anyway, a day later, after Sonic and Tails have managed to get their bearings and recover from their shipwreck, or plane wreck I guess it would be, they find Marine, who is getting ready to take off in her little jet ski that she built. Kind of impressive to me that a kid like her was able to build a jet ski, but whatever. However, unfortunately, her jet ski does have a couple of issues, and she ends up crashing it. And upon seeing this, Tails offers to build her a new jet ski, which is exactly what he does. And now with this new jet ski, as Sonic and Tails are kind of stranded on this island for now, they decide to take this to start exploring the nearby islands and see if they can't figure out where they are. And Marine tags along with Sonic and Tails as she has always wanted to explore the world past just Southern Island, where she's always lived her whole life. She definitely has quite a bit of an adventurous spirit, and this is actually where we start to introduce kind of the main focus of Marine's character and kind of her major arc throughout the game. Because Marine is depicted as being a child, very specifically, like she is just a kid. Which is kind of honestly a little bit weird, because Tails is also a kid, but whatever, he can do things because he's a super genius. Marine, however, is depicted as being nothing more than just some child, and so she's kind of not really understanding the gravity of the situation that they find themselves in, and is not really taking things seriously and understanding the danger of what they're doing. They're going to all these unfamiliar islands where they don't know what's around the next corner, and Marine is just excited and having a good time exploring around and adventuring like she's always wanted to do, as if she's kind of just a kid playing for fun. And at first, Sonic and Tails are trying to explain to her that, like, hey, Marine, stick with us, it's dangerous to go alone, we don't know what's out there. But she kind of just ends up ignoring what they say a lot of the time and excitedly goes off to adventure, saying, don't worry about it, you're freaking out over nothing, as she's just a kid. She doesn't really have much experience with true danger. And as it turns out, there is some danger to be found here because there are a lot of robots out on these seas that they run into many times on their adventures on these different islands. It ends up being okay though, because Sonic and Tails are there to look after Marine, but multiple times she ends up running off on her own and they're like, oh god, Marine, is she gonna be okay? And they have to find her, usually in some sort of precarious situation. And then Sonic and Tails have to step in and, deal with things. Marine is actually kind of creating a slight bit of a problem for Sonic and Tails, where they have to constantly keep an eye on her to make sure she's okay, but they decide to let her tag along anyway, as she's not really causing that much trouble, and she's fun to have around. They're kind of just placating her to let her go on that fun adventure that she's always wanted to go on, but in a way where they're watching over her to make sure she's okay. They're kind of acting like her babysitters in this game. They even end up playing along with her whole thing where she's like, I'm Captain Marine and you two are my crew, and then she tries to confront things by herself, not understanding that this big robot is actually super dangerous. But then Sonic and Tails are like, oh, well, Captain's gotta have their bodyguards, right? So let us take care of this, Captain. And by playing along like that, they kind of get Marine to, stay out of trouble. And eventually, while exploring the nearby islands, Sonic, Tails, and Marine run into Captain Whisker. Captain Whisker also has his two cronies, Minnie and Mum, who kind of just act as his comedic relief kind of backup characters. Just someone for him to bounce off of in order to make jokes and kind of play up how amazing the great and mighty Captain Whisker is. Weird little detail about these two is that, they're so irrelevant that you never even fight them in the gameplay. They're nothing. They're just there in the cutscenes to be someone for Whisker to talk to. Very strange. But anyway, Captain Whisker is going on about the Jeweled Scepter and how he's finally gotten his hands on it and yada yada. And once he's confronted by Sonic and crew, he recognizes that this must be the hedgehog that's been giving his crew a bunch of trouble. And Sonic and Tails figure out that all the robots that they've been running into must be from Captain Whisker. Meanwhile, Marine starts going and pulling on his mustache because, again, she's just a kid and she's not taking things seriously. And then he violently bats her away, though thankfully Marine isn't hurt and completely clueless about the situation. She's like, that was awesome, do it again! And then Whisker's like, how dare ye touch me, Whiskers? Because, oh yeah, by the way, Captain Whisker talks with a traditional, stereotypical pirate accent. I have no idea what that turns into in Japanese. If anyone knows, again, let me know in the comments. Anyway, Whisker is pissed, and he's about to give Sonic and crew what for, until... Heyo, it's Blaze, and Sonic and Blaze do the quick Blaze, what are you doing here? Sonic, what are you doing here? But they realize they don't have time for that. They have to deal with Captain Whisker first. And they team up together to deal with another one of his robots while he makes an escape, and now we have a bit of time for Sonic and Blaze to reconvene and figure out what's going on. By the way, during that fight, Captain Whisker managed to steal the Jeweled Scepter and get away. Anyway, now that we got some time, Sonic and Tails ask Blaze what she's doing back in their world, but then Blaze responds with, actually, you guys are in my world. It turns out that energy signal and tornado that they ran into at the beginning of the story somehow managed to send Sonic and Tails into the Soul Dimension. And they figure that since when Blaze was sent into their world, it was because there was some trouble going on. It's probably the same case here now in Blaze's world, and so they offer, hey Blaze, why don't we help you out with this whole situation? And to that, Blaze says sure. Hey, look at that, character development from the first game continuing on. Nice to see that. Oh, and by the way, while they were having this whole conversation, Marine kept on popping up of being like, yeah, I can help, I'll do things too, don't worry, Blaze, I've got this. And Blaze is just like, Sonic, who is this child? What is going on? And Sonic and Tails are just like, it's a long story. You know, Sonic and Tails, they're happy to play along with Marine and let her have some fun on their adventure, but Blaze, being the no-nonsense type character that she is, she's just like, what are you two doing? Definitely makes sense for Blaze's character that she wouldn't really be very good with kids. And this is the point in the story where Marine starts to become a little bit more problematic, as now things have actually started to get quite a bit more serious. At first, it was just Sonic and Tails are lost and don't know where they are, and they're trying to figure things out. But now suddenly we have this bad guy with Captain Whisker. He stole the jeweled scepter, which is very important for some reason, and Blaze is here, so we've really got some serious situation going on. And while Sonic, Blaze, and Tails are talking about what they're gonna do as steps going forward and how to pursue Captain Whisker, Marine is just there like, alright, can we stop with all that and get back to having some fun? And they literally all just ignore her to keep going with the conversation. And this is kinda where things start to take a bit of a turn for Marine a little bit, where, you know, her little fun and games as being the captain of the crew of Sonic and Tails and exploring these islands, that's starting to kinda crumble a little bit as we start to get into actually a little bit more of what's really going on here. But before we keep going, I just want to take this moment to kind of talk a little bit more about what is going on in the story of Sonic Rush Adventure at this point, because now that we have a little bit better understanding of things, there's some cool little details that I want to touch on. First of all is the entire tone and aesthetic that Sonic Rush Adventure takes is one that I am a really big fan of. I want to say that I saw in an interview at some point that the director of this game was inspired by, like, old school, like, pirate sailing adventure stories like Treasure Island and stuff that he was reading, and he wanted to try to make a Sonic game with that kind of feel to it. So obviously we have the whole sailing, the pirates, all that kind of stuff going on in this story. And personally, I just love pirate shit and pirate-themed stuff like that. I'm a really big fan of it, so just having a Sonic game with that kind of aesthetic default is already something I'm super into. But then also, it's kind of nice because, in a way, this makes it feel a lot more like classic Sonic, in a way. You know, all of the classic games took place on a bunch of small islands. You know, South Island, West Side Island, Angel Island, Flicky Island, all of that stuff. And then once we got to, like, Sonic Adventure, they kind of stopped even mentioning islands and all that, and it just takes place wherever. But now here we get a whole game that's about going from island to island to island, and it's like, oh dude, it feels like a classic Sonic type of adventure in that kind of way. I'm a really big fan of that, and because the story takes place in the Soul Dimension, it does something that I really like that I wish Sonic would do more, which is it doesn't pointlessly shove a bunch of Sonic characters in there for no reason. We don't have any Knuckles or Amy or Shadow just here because whatever. It's Sonic and Tails going on an adventure, they run into Blaze again, as this takes place in the Soul Dimension, that's perfectly fine. But then other than that, we run into this new character that we have an adventure with, even with a new villain too, which is something I can definitely appreciate. The story isn't just Eggman did something bad and Sonic goes to stop him like 99% of other Sonic games. And also, one other detail I want to point out is that with this being the Soul Dimension, I have to wonder if the starting island that the game takes place on, Southern Island, is that meant to be the Soul Dimension equivalent to South Island from Sonic's world? You know, it kind of makes a little bit of sense there, South Island, Southern Island being the first island that we go to, our starting location for Sonic 1 and the beginning of Rush Adventure. And actually, even the second island you go to is toward the west of Southern Island, you know, maybe a bit like it's the equivalent of West Side Island? I don't know, probably not, but it's kind of cool. Apparently, the Jeweled Scepter has the ability to control the planet's natural geological events, and so anyone who's holding it can cause volcanoes to erupt, and earthquakes, and floods, and tidal waves, and all kinds of things like that. So obviously, they can't let someone like Captain Whisker hold on to it. From here, the story doesn't really have a whole lot going on for a while. It basically just turns into the crew starts pursuing after Captain Whisker to try to get the Jeweled Scepter back from him, and he repeatedly manages to get away, so we have to pursue him to all these different locations. And all these different locations take place on different islands, you know, we're sailing around trying to find where Whisker went this time, yada yada yada. And there are some nice details that I like about in this whole section of the game, even if there's not a lot of, like, plot stuff going on. Like, for For one, something that I talked about in Sonic Rush 1's story is how, like, the levels and the gameplay felt entirely detached from the main story, but this time around they've actually kind of addressed that, because generally all the zones here are relevant to the story in some kind of capacity. There's at least an explanation for why we're here. You know, all of these are different islands that we're exploring and all that. But, like, you know, this zone here is like a ghost graveyard of a bunch of old pirate ships and stuff, right? And it's like, we think Captain Whisker might be hiding out here. And then you get little character interactions of, like, Marine is afraid of ghosts, but then she's putting on this front of, like, I can do it, I'm the captain, I'm brave, no problem, I'm not afraid of ghosts. And everyone else is like, you know, Marine, if you're afraid, you can just stay back for this one, we got it. And she's like, no, I can do it, I'm fine, I'm fine. You know, Marine putting up a front to keep going with her whole, I'm the captain, I'm not afraid, this is all just fun kind of stuff. I'm skimming over a lot here because, like I said, there's not a whole lot of plot-relevant things that happen during this section of the game, but there are lots of character interactions like this that definitely help to flesh out the relationships that mainly Marine develops with all the other characters even further, to really let you feel how all the other characters are kinda trying to put up with Marine while they continue on dealing with the actual problem at hand, you know, like the adults are talking kind of thing. It even starts to come across a little bit like Marine is being willfully ignorant, like she understands that there actually is something more serious going on here, but she's actively kind of trying to ignore that in order to continue having her fun adventure. One scene I do want to highlight is this one here where eventually Blaze says to Sonic and Tails, like, hey, don't you think it would be a good idea if we left Marine behind? Like, this is starting to get really dangerous and very serious. We can't have some kid just tagging along with us and causing problems. And Marine throws a whole fit over this of like, no, I want to go on my adventure. You can't stop me now. I need to. Come on, please. And Sonic and Tails are like, we can look after her. It'll be just fine. And Blaze is like, all right, I guess she can still come along, but she needs to promise that she's going to listen to what we say and stay with us from now on. Which Marine says that she's going to do, but if you can tell anything by her personality, maybe she's not going to be keeping that promise. Also, one other thing I want to mention that happens during this part of the story is at one point, they go to a floating continent called Sky Babylon, which Blaze describes as the last remaining remnant of an ancient civilization. Now, don't that sound familiar? Again, I have to wonder if this is supposed to be like the Soul Dimension equivalent of Angel Island. Certainly could be possible, although it could also be the equivalent of another floating continent that we see in a Sonic spin-off that I'll be getting to eventually. But anyway, in their pursuit of Captain Whisker, Sonic and crew eventually manage to find where his base is, and so now all they have to do is attack his base and get the Jeweled Scepter back from him. But before they leave, there is one more problem that they have to deal with. I quite like that scene. It's very well established up to that point in the story that, you know, Marine, she's tagging along and it's fun at first, but over time things start to get more and more serious, and she starts to become more and more of a bit of a problem, and then it all comes to a head in that scene there. And of course, Sonic and Tails are trying to be gentle about it, but Blaze does not give a fuck. She is gonna say it like it is, because it's the only way to really get Marine to understand. You know, very good characterization there for all the characters, everything working out very well. and actually effectively having a little bit of drama in this fairly simple story. However, Marine is not quite done yet. She thinks that if everyone else thinks that she's a nuisance and she's just gonna get in the way, then she's gonna have to prove that she can be a proper captain. Surely there's no way this could go wrong. Catching up with our main trio, they arrive at Captain Whisker's hideout, and there's a nice little scene here of Blaze kinda thinking over what she said to Marine, kinda like she's feeling like she was a bit overly harsh and feeling bad about it, but Sonic's like, don't worry about it, it was the right thing to do, she'll get over it, it's fine. A bit of dramatic irony there. After making their way through Captain Whisker's hideout, then Sonic and Blaze confront him and have a bit of a fight, and after defeating Captain Whisker, they demand the Jeweled Scepter back. But Whisker says something a little strange, where he says that he can't give it back or else they're going to feel his wrath. And Captain Whisker manages to once again slip away. Or at least it seems like he's going to slip away until Marine shows up and pursues after him all by herself. And Sonic and crew are like, oh god, Marine, she's in trouble, we gotta go deal with this right now. And by the time they manage to catch up, Whisker has managed to capture Marine. Blaze attempts to scold Marine for trying to go off on her own after she promised not to do that, but they don't exactly have time for that. They have to deal with Captain Whisker first, and after playing a bit of a kinda childish prank on him, they manage to get him to drop Marine and save her, so now all they have to do is defeat him. Captain Whisker is definitely depicted as much more of a comical villain for the most part, even more so than they sometimes depict Eggman to be in certain Sonic games. But of course for Marine standards, he's still definitely a very real threat. And then Sonic and Blaze defeat Whisker and manage to get away, and then we just have the final scene of everyone going like, Marine, what were you thinking? That was super dangerous, we were really worried about you. And she's all like, I'm sorry, but I thought that if I did something I could help, I could prove myself to you guys and all that. And Sonic's like, it ended up okay, so it's fine, but seriously, that was dangerous, you shouldn't do things like that. And Marine actually does apologize for that and say, alright, maybe it's a bit time that I cool it a little bit. Now that Marine has actually gotten into a bit of trouble there, she's kind of started to wake up to the reality of the situation that she is just a kid and she can't really do very much. And instead of just ignoring that, maybe it's for the best that she actually acknowledge that fact. However, it turns out that Marine wasn't completely useless, because while the other characters are worrying about what happened to the Jeweled Scepter and thinking that it might have sunk to the bottom of the ocean with Whisker, Marine actually managed to steal the Jeweled Scepter from him while she was captured. So look at that, she's a little bit more capable than everyone is willing to give her credit for. She actually managed to do something that actually helped for real. And while Blaze thanks her for managing to get it back, she still tells her that that was very dangerous and what if something had happened to Marine. To which Marine now does agree with. Still though, she managed to get it back, so all's well that ends well in this case. And everyone heads back, and there's a nice little moment here where Blaze stops and she tries to say something to Marine, but she ultimately doesn't say anything and just goes on her own. And obviously she's trying to apologize to Marine for how harsh she was earlier, but you know, Blaze not really that used to relationships and socializing and dealing with people, so she kind of doesn't really manage it. Good little character moment there, very nice. That's the kind of stuff I really like about the writing of these Rush games, is that they throw in things there that aren't really necessarily needed in terms of forwarding the plot or whatever, but it just works to flesh out the characters a little bit more and make them feel a little more real. And we end with everyone heading back to Southern Island and Marine excitedly thinking about how she's going to tell everyone about all the adventures she's been on, although she thinks no one's going to believe the part about her getting the Jeweled Scepter back, as, you know, she's just a kid, and one day she's going to show them all and become a real captain and go on real adventures of her own. And that is the story of Sonic Rush Adventure, or rather, it would be if not for the fact that there is one final thing that we have to deal with, which is Sonic and Tails getting back to their own dimension. Blaze mentions that the Soul Emeralds are what sent her to their world in the first game, so maybe they'd be able to do the same thing with the Chaos Emeralds, which also at some point were sent to this dimension. That's never really explained, but I guess that happened at some point. And Tails explains that he's working on a device that should be able to use the emeralds in order to send them back home. It's going to take a little bit for it to be finished, so they're going to be stuck here for a little while, and they ask Marine if it's okay if they stick around for a while. And she says of course, and even mentions that they can help her build her new ship, as she is working on a replacement for the jet ski that she destroyed at the beginning of the story. So there you go, everything's good. The Jeweled Scepter is back where it belongs, and Sonic and Tails are going to be heading home soon enough, right? Well, there is one other problem. It turns out that at some point, someone manages to once again steal the jeweled scepter. And this is where Blaze mentions that there is another thing she's been worried about in regards to the jeweled scepter, because not only does it allow someone to control the geological events of the planet, but it also apparently has something to do with some sort of power of the stars, and that it acts as some sort of key to that power. There's not much known about this, as it's just a legend, but Blaze is worried that perhaps that's what Captain Whisker was truly after. And this is when Tails brings up that, remember before when Captain Whisker said that you're going to know his wrath? Who was that his that Captain Whisker was referring to? And that is when the ground starts shaking and things start going bad right off the shore of Southern Island. A massive robot comes out of the water, and look who it is. Naturally, our heroes figure that the one who created the robot pirates in the first place probably was Eggman, to which he admits it was. And it turns out he was not working alone in this endeavor, as he was also once again accompanied by Eggman Nega. Apparently, the legendary power of the stars resides right below Southern Island, and so the Eggmans are going to take advantage of that using the Jeweled Scepter to take over the Soul Dimension and blah blah blah. I'll say here that while I did like before that this was a story without Eggman in this case, I'm actually okay with this last minute, oh, it was actually Eggman all along kind of thing. Because, I mean, for one, it's kind of hinted at from the very beginning just with the appearance of Captain Whisker, the fact that he looks like Eggman. We know that Eggman has a habit for building things that look just like him because of how narcissistic he is, so it makes perfect sense. And also another thing is that so many Sonic games around this time were having some other thing be the actual final villain. You know, Metal Sonic or Chaos or the Bio Lizard or Black Doom or Solaris or whatever. It's nice to kind of have the inversion of that, where at the last minute it turns out that the real villain was actually Eggman all along. Kind of props him back up again and kind of makes him out to be more of a threat like he's supposed to be instead of kind of a joke as he was for a large portion of this era of Sonic. Anyway, the two Eggmans head below Southern Island to start cultivating the power of the stars, and our good guys manage to follow up after them, as Tails just happened to have built a giant drilling machine previously in the story, just conveniently in case something like this happened. Now that's a serious fucking ass pull right there, but I guess whatever. So the crew digs down into Southern Island to pursue after the Eggmans, and once they catch up to them, then it turns out that they're already too late. They have acquired the power of the stars and are using it to fuel their robot here. Eggman even claims that he thinks this is more power than either the Chaos Emeralds or the Soul Emeralds. And Eggman Nega goes as far as taunting Blaze by thanking her, as it's due to the royal family protecting the Jeweled Scepter for generations that he was able to get his hands on it. And now that he does have it, he no longer has a use for the royal family, and so he's like, I'll just wipe your entire kingdom off the map, how about that? And of course, Blaze is a princess, she takes her duty very seriously, and so him threatening her kingdom and her people is something that she is very not okay with, and she gets really pissed, and she's about to, like, have a knee-jerk reaction where she goes to attack him, but Sonic is like, whoa, calm down, Blaze. If you just act rashly, then something might happen to you, and if that happens, who's gonna look after your people? You are the princess, after all. You gotta make sure that you're okay. Your people need you, and that manages to calm Blaze down, and she's like, you're right, I can't act carelessly here. And then, of course, you know how this goes. Sonic and Blaze turn into their super forms, and they confront the two Eggmans and manage to defeat them. And while Eggman is like, no, Sonic, not again, Eggman Nega is taking things a little bit differently, where he's a bit more like, you know what, fuck it, if I can't win, then no one wins, and he uses the power of the stars to start up an attack that will destroy the entire fucking planet. And even Eggman is like, whoa, Nega, what are you doing? Are you insane? That's gonna kill us too, you idiot. But Nega does not give a shit. But just as he's about to fire this laser, then BAM! A shot comes in from off-screen, and it turns out to come from Marine. Oh, look at that. I guess she has the power to shoot, like, energy blasts or something? That just comes out of nowhere, but sure, whatever. She basically does, like, the Vegeta from the Cell Saga of DBZ, where, you know, you distract the guy at the very last minute, And then Blaze comes in with the setup, and everyone's like, Sonic now! And he blasts through their robot. It's a really, really cool scene where everybody works together. I very much like it. And of course, this works as a nice little payoff for Marine, where bam, at the very end, when things are at their most dangerous and most serious, she manages to help out. She's not just some useless kid. You know, a nice little payoff for her. And then all we have left is the final scene of the game, where it's some time later, and Tails has managed to build the craft that will get Sonic and Tails back to their own dimension. But before they leave, they have a bit of a conversation about how it's kind of weird that the Chaos Emeralds and the Soul Emeralds are both in the same dimension and they're in very close proximity to each other, yet nothing is happening. You know, in Sonic Rush, they mentioned that if that happens, it could cause immense amounts of power that might destroy the two universes or whatever, and there's been no occurrence of the two universes starting to get pulled together like what happened in the first Rush game, and they're kind of just wondering what's going on there. And Tails actually theorizes that it might be that the emeralds themselves are helping them out. That's the only thing Tails can come up with in terms of why the emeralds are working so smoothly. In fact, if not for that, then he really doesn't even think he'd be able to get this machine to work. And Tails just kind of heads off to get the machine ready after dropping that like it's nothing. Like, that's actually kind of a big deal. This is the first time in the Sonic series that there's ever been an implication that the emeralds might actually have a bit of sentience of their own. I guess there was a little bit that might imply that the Master Emerald is like that in Sonic Adventure, but there's never been anything like that for the Chaos Emeralds, and it's never been very prominent at all, even in the case of the Master Emerald. But honestly, I don't really dislike this idea here that the Chaos Emeralds and Soul Emeralds kind of have a will of their own. I actually think that actually is kind of cool, and I think it works pretty well for the Sonic series, because as Sonic and Blaze are having their final goodbyes, Sonic's like, what happened to the Jeweled Scepter? Blaze explains that it's back under guard from her royal family now, and under much more heavy security than it was before, so it should be okay. And she asks Sonic if he thinks that perhaps it was the emeralds that brought him and Tails to this world, that they kind of knew that the Soul Dimension was in trouble and that Blaze would need help, and they pulled Sonic here to help her out. And Sonic is just like, yeah, sure, I guess that's possible, why not? Very appropriate for Sonic that he's not really too worried about the details and he just goes with the flow of things. Doesn't really matter to him why he's here. He was brought here and things all worked out. And then we end things on the final cutscene of the game. I'm gonna be honest with you, that last conversation between Sonic, Tails, and Marine, it actually got a little bit of an emotional reaction out of me. Just a small one, you know? They did a very good job of effectively building up Marine's character throughout this story as just some kid that's not taking things seriously and can't really do anything, kind of ignoring that fact and just wanting to go on this fun adventure. And then we have this nice little arc for her where by the end of everything, she's realized that she's not the cool, brave adventurer that she liked to make herself out to be, but she is now acknowledging that. She's no longer ignoring that fact. She's actually accepting who she is and is going to decide from now on to try to improve herself to get to where she wants to be. We had that one little moment there where she was able to help out and distract the Eggman so Sonic and Blaze could finish them off, showing that Marine is still capable, but at the end of the day, she is just a kid, and she has a lot of growing to do, but the potential is there, and one day Marine could become the cool adventurer that she wants to be. Once again, just like the first Sonic Rush, this is wonderful. This is exactly the kind of story that I want to be seeing out of Sonic. Simple, fun, adventurous stories that are focused on characters. Like Sonic Rush was Blaze's story, this actually kind of is mostly Marine's story here. I really like Marine as a character, actually. She is exactly the type of character that I want to see more of in the Sonic series. A character that Sonic runs into that has a bit of a problem that, because Sonic is just the way he is and that he brings good to people and positive change, he helps them work through their issues a little bit and end up a little bit better on the other side of their adventure. And along with that adventure, we get fun times with all the characters, fun interactions, and stuff like that. Bonus points in the case of Rush Adventure for feeling kind of like original classic Sonic stuff, doing all this island hopping and stuff. I'll be honest, as far as like tone and type of story goes, Sonic Rush Adventure is pretty much exactly what I want out of a Sonic story, even more so than the first Rush, because it's not like shoving in all the other characters in here for no reason like what happened in the first Rush. And there's a bit of a beefier story here where everything is in context of the story. We don't just have levels that are just levels for no reason. And there's a lot more story going on here. There's a lot more cutscenes that are a little bit beefier in terms of how they develop the characters and the relationships and set things up for this ending to work. I know I glossed over a lot of the stuff going on there because it doesn't really forward the plot, but again, if you actually like pay attention to things and really get into it, you do see a good amount of character development and relationship building throughout the fun adventure of this story that I think is pretty well done. It's very unfortunate that the story of Sonic Rush Adventure is told with these very kind of lame visual novel sequences. Like, in general, I kind of think it's a huge shame that Sonic Rush Adventure was a handheld game, because I think if you could have turned this into a console game, just think about it. We could have like a 3D boost game where you play as Sonic and Blaze during the gameplay, and then the story could have been told with more proper full cutscenes with voice acting and all that, and you could have had like the bigger, fuller Wind Waker style sailing. Like, this game is begging for like a console reimagining. I think it would work so much better this way. I often hear people say that they really don't give a shit about the story of Sonic Rush Adventure, and I totally understand that, because not everyone is going to get into these kind of VN cutscenes like this, and there are quite a number of them, and they are quite long in this game, so I can definitely see people feeling that they bog down the pace of the game a lot. But actually, personally, as someone that can kind of put up with the VN sequences here, you're probably going to think I'm a bit crazy for saying this, but Sonic Rush Adventure actually has my favorite story in the entire Sonic series thus far. It might not be told in the most engaging way possible, but to me, this is everything I want a Sonic story to be. It's just Sonic goes on an adventure, he meets people along the way, and he improves those people's lives just because he's Sonic. This is why I like Marine as a character, where most people really don't give a shit about her. She is an effective character to bounce off of Sonic and learn and grow through the adventure that she shares with him, exactly like Blaze in the first game, but even more effectively done as we get a lot more time spent with Marine interacting with Sonic and building up this conflict to eventually lead towards this character arc for her. As far as like story and tone and characterization and all that goes, the Sonic Rush series is like my favorite of all the Sonic sub-series. It just gets everything right without having all of the major issues that the other different Sonic series have. You know, all the adventure and 3D games like that are way too big and epic and focused on story, and it's just getting too far away from, like, what Sonic should be, in my opinion, which is something closer to the classic games, but, you know, even then, they were very, very simplistic, and they barely even really got to tell their stories because, you know, they were really old games. This lands a wonderful middle ground where it feels like an evolution of those classic Sonic stories, but actually being told in a proper way where you can actually get invested in the story and care about the characters and what's going on, which the adventure-style games also manage to do, but I feel personally that they push things quite a bit too far. There's a reason that people always say that those games are way too focused on story, and I do agree with that, whereas these Sonic Rush games I feel have the perfect amount of story, where it's just enough where you can get what you need to have a satisfying, proper Sonic story, but it doesn't get too much in the way. The only issue is the fact that it's told with these really shitty visual novel cutscenes. That's why I'm saying we need this game to be reimagined as a 3D console game. I think that could work so freaking well, and in fact, you know, a lot of people these days are like, give us Sonic Adventure 3, but personally, after revisiting these two Rush games, I'm like, fuck that, I don't give a shit about Adventure 3. I want a proper Sonic Rush 3. I want another adventure of Sonic and Blaze, you know, fighting Eggman and Eggman Nega, collecting the Chaos and Soul Emeralds, simple character stories that are effectively told. Give me that. I want more of it, because these two games are just so goddamn good. And unfortunately, because the Rush series never continued, there are things that are built up there that never got paid off. You know, Cream, she was waiting for Blaze to come back one day, and while Blaze does eventually return, she never really interacts with Cream very much again. We never get that proper reunion of Blaze and Cream. And Marine, you know, I want to see Marine one day grown and showing Sonic how far she's come. And, you know, the game ends on this lovely little note of, I'll see you again one day and show you how cool I am then, but we all know that we're never ever going to see Marine ever again, and that really sucks. In the past, I've complained about them just shoving Sonic characters into games for no fucking reason, but this is a case where I don't want Marine to become like a mainstay Sonic character in every single game, but I want to see her just one more time so we can actually get a payoff of this ending, because it just kind of ends on a bittersweet note there of like, I'll see you again one day, but actually no, I'm never going to see you again one day. It's very unfortunate. But there you go, the story of Sonic Rush Adventure. Definitely one of my favorites. This is just so right. This is just so Sonic. And I love it. Thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.